She was the drummer that Coltrane was very close to.
Folks, welcome inside the Paris Sea Palace, high above 3733 Broadway. This is a special live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you live on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app and stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. We can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today, and it's a high honor to bring in a cat who has been stretching people's ears with sonic melodic improvisation for the last 4 or 5 decades. He comes from the great city of Philadelphia, but has always tried to make his mark as an individual voice on an instrument that is normally used to lock the groove, which he does quite well. Jamaaladeen, Tacuma, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Jake, thank you so much for being patient with me.
It's fine, man.
It's crazy, but I appreciate everything that you're doing for myself and as well as the other guys who are, trying to forging this music through. And thanks for being patient with me.
I just wanted you to talk, if you could, about this, what I consider to be, after 6 years and over 1,000 interviews, and now I get a chance to talk to you. I just want you to talk about this music. What it really is that we live in a time now where, it is about the leader, the band is in the back, accompanists are not recognized. It's how much, what's the bottom line. But the more that I talk to people from your generation, it's really a people's history of music. And I just wanted to get your take on that.
Well, basically, I like to think of music in a very organic way. And I think of music more or less of it being sound and driven. And, of course, when you have sound, you can decipher melody and you can, break it down and you can make all of those different things happen, arrangement, melody, blah, 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 blah. But sound being the most important aspect of any human connection, I would say that people are now, like you said, basically in an age of commercialization. I think people are moving towards more of an organic way of expression, that being the musicians themselves as well as the listening audience. So I've been, I've through Ornette, I've been able to understand that, and that's been very clear to me. And I'm not being moved by what's the latest trend. I'm not being moved by the idea of the person out front and the band behind. I'm more moved about a complete ensemble, and singing about music on stage, or in studio, a complete ensemble, bringing forth sort of a democratic way of thinking about sound.
I just want you to go a step further because, obviously people got to sing for their supper. But, I mean, if one thing, I was born in 1978, and one thing that that I always am fascinated about is that it seemed to me that there was room for full creative expression, like in the case of Ornette, and also being able to at least make a little bit of money. Maybe not what they deserve, but it was quantified. And now it seems like you can only do the commercial vein if you want to get paid. But you tell me.
No, well, the first thing is this. Then it becomes a very spiritual thing, and I'm very serious about this.
Yes.
You have to eat, and the whole idea and concept about a starving musician, starving artist, I don't buy that. I mean, my concept is that, okay, good. If he wants to do his music the way that he wants to do it, then let him do that. But then he's going to have to make the choice if he's going to, find other ways of making money to eat for himself and his family, or he's going to just, sort of fall in line. And it becomes a very spiritual thing, whereas, my belief is that whatever the Creator or God has for you, nobody can take it away. And whatever you're not supposed to get, you're not going to get it. So it doesn't matter how many knives you throw in folks' back trying to reach a pedestal of success or so-called success, that's not going to work. So an artist has to be satisfied from what they have. You know, I mean, they have to really think of it in spirituality terms because, you know, you can't, you know, I mean, I have plenty of folks when you go into their house, they have gold records hanging on their walls, but that doesn't move me. I'm not even impressed because that individual who has that, they're always looking at me and folks that I hang out with like, wow, how do you guys do what you do? We do what we do because we're thinking independent. We're thinking in a way where we're controlling our masters. We're thinking in a way that we're controlling our work. And we're not putting it in the hands of people who, before you can receive your check, that it's got to go through all of their, you know, this and that and the other. And so now brings me to the idea and concept of the social media concept, which is a beautiful thing for us right now because we can utilize that to at least get our point across and not have to wait on anybody to say, well, you know, we want you to sound like this or we want you to look like this. So, you know, the whole idea of making money, one has to be satisfied with whatever they got and be cool with that. Now, if you're not, then you can only make yourself sicker by being jealous, being envious, blah, 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 blah. But, you know, that doesn't apply to me.
Well, you know, if you could put yourself back in the mid-'70s when you were marinating, I guess Columbia Avenue had about 10 jazz clubs in Philly.
Right.
You know, and you had these, but yet you were still insecure as a young person. And now we live in this even more conformist time. In my mind, you know, it's a, you know, you could say it's corporate fascism.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
Well,
no, I mean, but it was.
I want you to talk to younger peeps listening around the world about how to stay mentally strong, not develop self-pity or jealousy, but to stay the course. I want you to give
I just said it. I just made it very clear. It's a spiritual. It comes into being a spiritual thing. You have to, I mean, a younger person, because I understand exactly what you're saying. Yeah. And what's happening now is that, you know, if the younger person, I mean, the only reason why I'm able at this particular time in my career, able to go back and forth to Europe and to perform and to be somewhat successful is because all the work that I put in early 70s, 80s, blah, 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 blah. And so that's carrying me through now. The younger person who's coming up, it's very difficult for them to break into that because everything has become homogenized, and it's becoming a situation where, you know, if you don't sound like this person, then, you know, we're not going to get you in. Aside from the point of the business itself being cliquey, so the whole concept of being independent, it comes back to that. If you're making the kind of music, if the younger person is making the kind of music that, first of all, it's really ridiculous how all of these people, and the schools should do something about it. The schools are just churning out these young folks who are doing all of this stuff that when they come at the end, they have nowhere to do it. They have nothing to do. They have nowhere to go with it, and nothing to do with it, except those people who are led into the cliques, where, you know, they can, you know, sort of make a situation for themselves based off of others who are letting them in the door, the gatekeepers.
Right.
But other than that, the younger folks, they have to think more in independent terms, and they have to, you know, be true as to what type of musical style they want to adhere to, and then if they want to choose to pursue that, then they got to be firm with it, and they got to rock with it, because otherwise, you know, they're going to be dissatisfied and disheartened as to the business. And like I said, the business is very cliquey, and it has nothing to do with what you know. It has all to do with who you know. Sorry to say. And that, you know what, Jake, you know what? That's part. I have a master class that I hold in Europe as well as in the States called Music and the Human Experience, and I talk about that exactly. And I try to give the younger folks a heads up as to what to expect, because a lot of them are sitting in their rooms. You know, they're just so concentrating on being famous, and just so concentrating on, you know, having that top 10 hit or this, that, and the other. And then when they come out, they find that the world is completely different than that. There's a lot of A&R guys. There's not even that many A&R guys anymore. But the guys that are left are still doing the same stuff that the old A&R guys used to do. And that was to receive all of these demo tapes from guys. And if they didn't like it, it winds up right in the trash cans.
Yeah, I also feel like, I mean, it's a very much a one and done situation. I mean, you look at any cats, I think Bruce Springsteen might have been 3 or 4 albums before he had a top 10 hit. A lot of bands had time to cultivate their own individual sound, and we're just living through a time now where people feel like you got one shot, you got 20 seconds, and if you don't turn heads, you're done. And that was not always the case within the. Again, I would love you to talk. I mean, you are somebody who's used the electric bass proficiently and demonstratively. Can you talk about early on, before you met Ornette in the early 70s, what you were seeing from cats like, Miroslav Vitouas, Stanley Clarke, these guys who were, for the first time in my mind, even some of the rock bands, they were using the bass as a third voice. They weren't necessarily just using it as a time to lock the groove. And I wanted you to talk about how that had an impact. If there was something that stood out to you.
Well, I would take it even one step further. And I would think that they were guys who were thinking of the bass as a first voice, because you had cats like Eberhardt Weber, right?
Right.
You had cats like Miroslav, of course. Then you had guys like, Stanley and Jaco, of course. They were definitely trailblazing at that time on the electric bass. And then you had cats like Monk Montgomery, who was credited as being the first electric bassist, who played the Fender bass guitar when the Fender gave the bass guitar to Lionel Hampton, and Lionel Hampton gave it on to Monk. And this is, we're talking 1951, the first precision bass. So, at that same time that all those cats were happening, Miroslav and Eberhardt Weber and Stanley, then you had guys like Monk Montgomery in the background, still chomping at it and still laying sort of a foundational thing. Then you had all the guys who were bass players like Ronnie Baker here in Philadelphia, who did all the Kenny Gamble and Lionel Huff stuff.
Wow.
With the sound of Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Then you had cats like Val Burke, who was a bass player with Willie and the Mighty Magnificence, who was the backup band out of New Jersey that did all of the R&B groups like the Moments and the Whatnots. These were groups that were happening on an R&B level that was happening. And then you had Robbie from Kool And The Gang, who was like monsterizing the bass guitar as a first voice. And so what I'm doing is just a continuation of that. But those guys, they kind of really led the way. And there was more guys, and of course, like Chris Squire from Yes. Third voice, he was like a first voice.
Happy Ramadan, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, it didn't start yet.
Okay, it didn't start yet. So, all right. So, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about, the opportunity to, what Ornette's sort of his philosophy was as it related to the R word known as rehearsal. Were these albums that you made, these incredible albums starting in the 70s, was it basically about coming in with a sketch and then just, working that out and not doing a lot of rehearsal? Can you talk about, I feel like nowadays, again, I'm not in the studios, what's left of the studio scene, but you talk to a lot of studio cats and they walk in and, the leader of the band and the engineer had been working on the drum sound for 40 minutes, and it's like, there's this obsession with perfection because we have the tools to do it. But take me back to the organic nature of an Ornette Coleman session.
But Jake, let me ask you this first.
Yeah.
Had you heard anything, before I answer this, had you heard anything about that process before? Has anybody ever spoke to you about that process before?
What process?
This process of rehearsing and recording with Ornette?
Never.
Okay, so this was the deal. That perfection that you're talking about, if there was anybody who was a perfectionist, it was Ornette. To the point where,
wow.
Every time I would leave the rehearsal, when we would come to rehearsal, he would be sitting, and I have this vivid memory of him sitting at a table. If you look at some of his older photographs, you might find one or two of this same thing. He would always have a table in front of him, his violin, his trumpet, and his saxophone on the table, and his composition book, and his head bent down with pen or pencil in hand, writing. And that image, is so vivid in my mind. You would see that, when you would come to rehearsal, and as you was leaving, when rehearsal was over, he was still in that position as aside from when he would pick up the instrument and play with us. So we would go to have lunch or whatever. We would come back, and he would still, Charlie and I, the guitar player, we would just be laughing because he would still be in that position. But we've come to find out later that that was something that was very good for us to see because of the perfectionist nature that Ornette had. And we would rehearse all day long. We would rehearse, if we were doing an album or preparing for a tour, we would be rehearsing, all day long. And it would be no problem for us to go over one tune 15 times. Just so that we could, because it was more like, it wasn't so much of a concept of where you would play an instrument and that would be your, you would have your arrangement and, you would never veer from that. It was always a very organic thing. So every time you improvise, every time we would go into the improvising, which the compositional improvising, as we called it, it would bear fruit of different kinds of improvised ideas. And so that was endless. That was, you could do that all day and all night. And we understood that concept very well. And so we would take that same concept from the rehearsal to the recording to the live stage. And to me, that's what made it very, very interesting and very exciting.
Could you give an example of a tune or a session? Because what I'm getting at is the idea of how did you...
All of them. Every record that we've done, that same process applied. Every record that we've done, it got even grueling in a very positive way when Ornette came up with the idea of doing a record directed disc, which is a process that never had been done like in a while,
right?
Especially New York. Even it was done like in the 40s, in the 50s, but that concept sort of left the scene, and we did that on one record, which we didn't use that record, but so it was like the way that he was hearing things and wanting to sort of move into a perfection in terms of the improvising. You could only imagine. There's like one thing where if you're doing it with if you're doing it with tape, you could stop and, maybe you can go back and fix some things or whatever or move on. But we never wanted to do that. We wanted to always have whatever we did was right on the spot, right on the spot. So if we did a take on a direct disc, which you can't change, that meant that was scrapped. So not only was our energy was like getting tested, but the vinyl that was used, the lacquer that was being used was like getting thrown out. Oh, I wish I could find some of those old outtake lacquers. Sheesh, man, that's what, I know who has them too.
I just, as a non-musician, really, I'm not a professional musician. I'm just trying to figure out, with the relentless perfection of Ornette and the fact that you took that from the rehearsal to the studio into the live setting, how did you keep it so that how did you keep it fresh? How did you keep it so that it just didn't get monotonous?
Because musical ideas bear freshness. When you think of an arrangement where it's just, everybody's just, sort of playing a role, because we never thought about the instruments as being the instruments that they were. They were always vehicles of moving out of the realm of what the instrument was. I never thought about the bass as being the bass. I knew it was an instrument that had a certain tone quality, but when it came to the composition and the melodies, we were all free and we were all equal. And Ornette himself never thought about himself as being the leader of the band. Of course, he was a leader because, he was the leader of the band. But in terms of musical sense, he's always felt as though that he was inside of the music and not standing out in front, whereas, he's the saxophone player leader and, the band is in the background. And, no, this was all a participation, moving in the same direction.
Talking to Jamaaladeen Tacuma, it's such an honor to have him on the program. Were you aware of the changing dynamics of music at the time? What were the? Did you? I guess as part of the issue is that I talked to people like Ramsey Lewis, who basically said that for the most part, people got too far away from people being blue collar cat. Art Blakey would say things like, it's my job to wash away the dust of everyday life for the patrons that come in to see my show, and that you could tap your foot to the music. And I was wondering if to play abstract music, to play what you feel, to play complex music with odd meter, different time signatures, were you able to have a meaningful, did you feel that you guys were able to have a meaningful connection with the audience? Because as far as I'm concerned, I look at the drum track and disco, and I look at the shrinking venues and the lack of accessibility, and then sort of the complexity of the way jazz came on, and I feel like it went back to a very simple, more conservative mode by the late 70s, early 80s, where you were just hearing Rodgers and Hammerstein songbook. I just wanted you to talk about the kind of language you developed, and if you could talk about a time when you really connected viscerally with peeps.
Well, the thing about it is this: that I've always done that. There's a theater here in Philadelphia called the Uptown Theater. The Uptown Theater was the theater of choice that all of the bands, the soul bands, all of the R&B groups were coming and play part of the Chitlin circuit. It was just as equal as to the Apollo in New York.
Right.
So you had the Uptown Theater, you had the Howard in Washington. So you had all these different venues that these groups would play at. And of course, on Saturdays or whatever, I was there watching all of these groups, the Temptations, all of the R&B, Sam and Dave, all of the R&B groups would come through. So I saw that there was a certain connection that the artist had to have with the audience, period. Now, transferring that to what we did, that same thing applied. And it was even more of a connection because you saw the way that we played these odd meters, these odd times, these individualized senses of ideas and improvisation. Everybody who heard the music related to it in a different way. Sometimes people would dance. Sometimes people would just, sit down and listen attentively. Some people would maybe hear something emotionally that would make them cry. It was all of these different experiences that people had in hearing our music. And so for me, that connection that was made was more of an organic connection. It was more of a situation where I think that people were more receptive. I mean, the person that opened themselves up was more receptive to it.
So when you used to go to did you actually play on the Chitlin circuit at all?
No. I wasn't old enough then, but I knew a lot of the guys who were playing around at the time. When I came at the very end of it, but it wasn't like major theaters. It was maybe the clubs, because my first job was with an organist here in Philadelphia named Charles Erlin.
Wow.
And Charles Erlin, a.k.a. the Mighty Burner, okay, had a, and I was referred to Tyrone. I mean, I was referred to Charles Erlin from a few of my mentors, Philadelphia mentors, by namely Odine Pope, saxophone, Tyrone Brown, bass, and Sherman Ferguson.
Well, hold on. You're talking about Catalyst, man.
Talking about Catalyst.
Oh my God, dude!
Wow. We all studied. I studied with Tyrone Brown. There was an organization in Philadelphia called Model Cities, and Model Cities was an organization, was a program project that was designed to help the inner city youth. That was involved with gang wars and all the things that were happening, and so they had this project program going on called Model Cities, and in that project you had Catalyst there and also Jimmy Merritt there. They were there sort of mentoring and teaching students. So I was a part of that program. So when I became 18 years old, all of those guys from Catalyst referred me to play with Charles Erlin, because Charles Erlin was a Philadelphian as well, and of course they all knew each other. 60s and the 70s, they all knew each other. And so I started playing with Charles Erlin. So we started playing a lot of the clubs around, and I would consider that the Chitlin circuit too. But it wasn't the theaters; it was more like the clubs. It was like
the Bijou Cafe and things like that.
Like the Bijou Cafe, the Village Vanguard, the Village Gate, in other words, in Detroit, the what was the name of that place? The Mozambique.
Club Mozambique, yeah.
It was Mozambique, the spot in Newark, New Jersey, the Key Club. You know what I'm saying?
Oh my God! This is. I mean, those were like local neighborhood clubs. I mean, to be honest, I mean, those cats. Right. Bob Porter discovered Charlie Erland or Melvin Sparks when they used to play at those clubs, the Key Club in Newark or in Newark. There. Yeah. Right. So I mean
listen that heavy behind Hammond organ in that.
Can you go back and talk? Listen, this is so great because I've interviewed Odin, I've interviewed Tyrone. I love those guys dearly. Obviously, Sherman's left us and Eddie Green's left us, but I mean, those cats. I want you to talk more. There was a lot of violence, and they were really trying to channel younger peeps to play. To channel love through music. Can you talk a little bit more about their efforts and how it kept you on the right track?
Yeah, well, when they first started, they were definitely about that. They were part of an organization called Ile Ife, which was they were an African drum troupe and dance troupe that was headed up by Philadelphian artists, and they were dancers and musicians. And Arthur Hall was the leader and director of that particular organization, and Ile Ife. So, they had already, Tyrone and Sherman and Odin and Eddie, they had already started to change their names. They had like all African names, moving into to more of a peaceful, conceptual idea about themselves as well as the music. So quite naturally, in my mind, I remember that. I remember the dashikis. I remember seeing the peaceful concerts with incense was burning, and and the black love was happening all over the place, and that was a very cool thing. And so it was quite naturally that love and sharing of the spirit that they possessed kind of transformed to me.
Yeah, there was a cat that I wanted to ask you about. Was Hassan Ibn Ali. Did you know him?
Yeah, sure. I don't know him, but I heard of him. Yep.
Yeah, because he used to get on the piano, and all the tenor players at Spider Kelly's would walk off the bandstand except for Odin and Coltrane, because I mean he was hearing things that nobody else could even hear, and therefore they couldn't play them. Do you think that is it? I mean, it's been kind of vetted pretty well, but this was still. These mentors of yours in the early 70s, I mean, you were dealing with, marijuana, and you were dealing with LSD, but, I mean, crack cocaine, that stuff had not come into play. Is that why aside from the Swahili names and the dashikis and the incense burning and the beautiful music, was it easier to coalesce because there wasn't hard drugs available?
Well, I don't know about the drug scenario, but I do know that musically it was just a very cool thing. I mean, I just remember hearing Astral Traveler by Pharoah Sanders,
right?
And to hear that same vibe move into Santana, and the stuff that McLaughlin and Santana did, and the love that Carlos Santana had for John Coltrane and Alice Coltrane. Wow. I mean, that's like some heavy stuff for a young guy to witness and experience and to hear. And it could only, it was just only, and that was like spiritual stuff. And I don't know if it had anything to do with drugs.
Well, no, I was talking more about the coalescing of the inner city communities. I mean, if you felt like if it was an authentic thing, because you look at it today. I remember talking to Larry Willis. He's like, there's one jazz club left in Baltimore, and you need to get buzzed in because it's not in a good neighborhood. One club that adheres to a jazz, a steady, what they consider to be melodic music, and so these communities are not safe anymore, but they were safe back then.
Sure. I mean, they were. It just goes. It's just like everything else. I mean, in the African American community, everybody owned their own stuff. So, there was a certain, there was families that were looking after each other. There was like, if you talk to like a lot of African Americans, they'll like say, well, she was like mama, Johnny down the street, my friend, and his mom was just like my mom. If I did something out of pocket, she beat my butt just like my mom
exactly.
And it wasn't nothing malicious and mean about it. It was just like everybody looked after each other. So, that same thing applied to the music. That same thing applied to the neighborhood, and of course it's changed now.
It absolutely has. When did you first meet? I'm always fascinated with this, Blood Ulmer. How did you meet him?
I think I met Blood coming up to Ornette Loft.
So he still had the Artist House in New York City.
Right. When I first met Ornette, he had the Artist House. We was living there and rehearsing there, and it was a beautiful thing. And I met Blood there.
Can you talk about? Calvin Keys was talking about his search, Blood Ulmer's search for the drone, the sound of the drone in his guitar.
Uh-huh.
Can you talk about? When you would get on the bandstand, what was that do? I've just never got a chance to. I don't even know if his records do justice to his live output, and the same could be said for Ornette. But what is Blood's legacy to melodic improvisation?
Well, he had a certain way of thinking about it. He had also a certain way of approaching the tuning of his guitar, and that's probably what you're talking about.
Right.
But within that is something that we were sort of moving in a certain direction that I didn't really have time to talk to him about it. We were just so busy working, playing music, and that's something that's something that I actually wanted to do. I wanted to go to New York and just hang out and stay with him for a couple of days and just talk to him a little bit, because I would like to have a better understanding of his approach as well. But that's something that I never really did. I just know that when we got together on stage, whatever he was bringing and whatever I was bringing together was creating something on its own.
Absolutely. No, this is important, though. Do you feel that younger cats today go back? I assume you went back to, you talked about Monk Montgomery. I know he might have been playing live with Lionel with the electric bass. I know the first time the electric bass was recorded in a jazz setting was with Monk Montgomery on an Art Farmer record in '53.
Right.
But can you trace the lineage of your string bass, or can you trace back? Because a lot of peeps would say today that a lot of younger cats they think the starting point is kind of blue, when in fact you need to go much deeper than that. And I wanted you to talk about your own evolution and how far back in the lineage.
Yeah. Here we go. Mandrill, War, Chaka Khan. Okay, the Sound of Philadelphia. The Delphonics, the Intruders, the Manhattans. All of that soul and R&B stuff. That was me. That was my essence. So it takes people out when they know how I play today in a very improv situation. But to me, it's all the same. But there is that defining moment when I was completely immersed in that, because that's being a Philadelphian, that's what we all listen to. So it started. Yeah. It started there.
Did you go back into the history, like the Slam Stewarts, and going back to the 20s and 30s?
No. I never went that far. As a matter of fact, a lot of the things that I'm still checking out today is amazing to me. I'm still learning, and when I learn about those guys, it's exciting to me. And it just puts me in a mood that I just want to just continuously learn about them. Yeah, because it was the same thing when I did Record Renaissance Man. I was like 25, and I had never known anything about Paul Robeson. Nobody told me anything about him. The school system, of course, I found out later about, the situation, how they erased his name out of most of the history books and this, that, and the other. And I was completely furious when I found out about him. and immediately went to Gramavision Records and said, I want to make this record called Renaissance Man, dedicated to Paul Robeson. So even today, I'm still learning about the Slam Stewarts and all these obscure people. And, you know, and just try to give them props. Just try to let folks know about them as well. Because it's not about me, it's about everything that's come before me.
This is important because I love listening to people refer to it as gospel music, and I finally found where R&B came from. And I wanted to know, there's a two-part question. So I found these records, tattered records here, Willie Banks and the Messengers, Bill Moss and the Celeste, Willie Banks and the Messengers, okay? There's a picture of a sanctified church in the middle of a field somewhere. And I'm telling you right now, the bass lines, the dudes are playing, first of all, they're singing about the Lord, but you know what? The music is so funky. It is so R&B. There is so much funk and roll, more roll than rock. And I'm like, and I listen to your playing and I say, that's the pocket of gospel soul that I love. And I'm wondering about experiences you might have had to either be in the sanctified church and to experience those guys playing electric instruments, electric bass, or even play.
Well, I wasn't really part of the whole sanctified church thing, although when I was younger, my mother used to send me down to North Carolina from Philadelphia to escape the gang warfares and stuff that was happening here.
Okay.
My folks down there in North Carolina, they had a farm. I learned discipline, getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, helping them on the farm, and going to church with them on Sundays. And, there I heard, a lot of the gospel things. But at the same time, every once in a while, in that particular church in North Carolina, there would be a group that would come from out of town, and they would have a guitar player, no drummer at the time. It would just be maybe a guitar player, the bass player, or just a guitar player, and the rest of the guys sang. Thus emulating the Five Blind Boys, the Dixie Hummingbirds and that kind of thing. So I saw that, and of course, it used to be like this church around in North Philly where I grew up at, and there was a woman in there that used to play. She used to play, she used to play the drums in there, and she would be killing it.
Like a full trap set? Because I know like a lot, like Jabo Starks and those guys.
Like a full trap set. She'd be in there killing it. Me and my man, we used to peek in there, and she'd just be in there just killing it on the whole trap drum set.
I was going to say, because could you talk about going from the urban jungle of Philadelphia, where there was the Philadelphia set, Vince Montana, that whole thing, and then there was obviously a spiritual sort of component to the church music. What was different about going down to Appalachia? There's something about the swing element. That Willie Banks and the Messenger stuff is the most. I mean, and it was there were these record labels that were dedicated to this wickedly funky soul gospel music. I mean, is there a way to figure what was going on in Appalachia that was so different from Philadelphia?
Appalachia, I have no idea.
Well, you said North Carolina. You went down to North Carolina.
North Carolina, yeah. What was going on there? I mean, there was like always you'd ride down the street, ride down the road, and you look in front of a store, and then you would see the guys hanging out at the store. Maybe one guy had a guitar in his lap playing, and that's pretty much what I saw. And so like all of the R&B people who became famous, your Aretha Franklins and your Ray Charles, they all started off in gospel music, and so they sort of just took it from there. When you hear Graham Central Station,
right,
even to this day, Sly and the Family Stone, that is straight from out of the church. I mean, that is straight from out of the church. If you listen to Graham Central Station, whoo boy, when they get into this thing when they play, and that's why Prince was like so enthralled with Larry Graham and that whole scene, and James Brown. All those guys did that. That was just what they did. Sam and Dave and Booker T, and all those things came from the church. It can't be denied.
They fused that gospel sound with the other things that were happening at the time. Do you want to talk?
Sure did. Buddy Miles.
Oh, you're nailing it. I mean, again, it was infectious. It was burning music. I did Charles Earland, could he kick pedals pretty well? Did you even have? I mean, he didn't. I know he didn't have to do it when you were in the band, but was he able to play bass lines with his feet?
Oh, absolutely. That's what he did.
But he brought you in, so he didn't need to do that.
He brought me in, and that was very new for him. And bringing a bass player in the scene, that was something that was very new at the time.
And let me ask you, could you talk about how you assimilated to that and how you communicated with him so that you were able to, so that the music breathed? Because I was under the impression, I think you might have been the first electric bass player to ever play with Charles Earland. Although he did play with on the recordings, there was always an electric bass player on those Prestige.
Yeah, he had a Prestige record. He had somebody to play with him, but in terms of really taking somebody out on the road, yeah, I was the guy who did that. But that was very new. It was new for him and new for me as well. And that's probably why I got fired. That's probably why I got fired, because it was so new to him that on a few levels. Because now I'm connecting the dots from which you was asking me earlier,
right?
About those first influences from the bass guitar that I got that was propelling me,
right?
And what I was becoming at the time as a bass guitarist, what was propelling me. I mean, in high school, guys was going out dating girls and all that. I never did that. I was just always home listening to all those records, with Ralph Towner and Terrence Ripple and all of that stuff.
I love where your head is at, man. You are such an obscure. Who else would be? Those duet albums with Ralph Towner and Glenn Moore are smoking hot on ECM. I love the fact that you were marinating in that stuff. It's just unbelievable.
Right, and just marinating. You know what I'm saying? So I was in my place. So what happened was, so now here comes this little monster being created. If I mean, I'm not being, I'm not just saying that, but that's actually what was brewing, because I was in my room so when I got with Charles Earland, and at the same time you had Stanley, Clarke, and Jaco. They were killing it at the time. But I was this little younger guy, a little bit under Alfonso Johnson, and so I'm coming in, and so he hires me to play with him, and when I would get a solo at the Key Club, I'll just kill the audience. I just kill them. Now you couple that right with with my sense of style and fashion, which was even prevalent at the time, and
even more flashy and outrageous, yeah.
Right. So now you figure I'm 18 years old.
Oh my gosh.
I'm coming in there with a gold guitar strap and some white Earth shoes, because now remember, Earth shoes were like these shoes that we used to wear back in the day, but they only came in brown and black. So I would come in with the white Earth shoes, gold guitar strap, and Charles Earland was just looking at me. So one night and you know what? I got fired at the Key Club. That's how I remember it well.
Can you spell the shoes? E-A-R-T-H?
Earth shoes.
Okay.
E-A-R-T-H shoes.
Was it fundamentally I remember in one of my interviews with Billy Cobham on the album that you probably was influenced by to a degree was Spectrum, and he said that
absolutely.
Okay, he said that, but this is interesting, and it leads into your relationship with Charles, and you can comment on it. He said that he originally had Stanley Clarke in the studio, but he said there was too much conversation going on, not verbally, but within the music. So he said, this is not going to work, and he brought in Leland Sklar, flew him across the country on a route. Okay, so was it that you guys weren't clicking on the bandstand, or was he just like...
Well, that's what he told me. When I got back, because he said, no, you can imagine this. I got a scholarship to go to Berklee College of Music, and I decided I didn't want to go to Berklee College of Music because I wanted to. Yeah,
that would be you would be thrown in an insane asylum today if you'd made that decision. I mean, it's unbelievable.
This is what I'm trying to tell you.
Right.
This is what I'm trying to tell you.
Right.
And I'm so glad that I made the choice. Although my wife wants to convince them to give me an honorary doctorate.
Well, but those things come along. It's true though. I mean, you a lot of I mean, it's funny. I think I interviewed Dr. Steve Gadd, and he made it very clear. I'm not a doctor. He got one from Eastman or something. You should try that. Right. Go ahead, man.
Well, she's definitely gung ho about that. She's like serious about it. I just laugh. But she says the wealth of experience that you have accumulated, being with the masters, being with Ornette Coleman, is something that you could not have bought. You could not have paid for that knowledge and that information. And and I just try to carry that on, through my master class that I give to folks. But so anyway, so I didn't go to Berkeley. I said I'm going to go on the road. I want to be like the ECM musicians. I want to play around the festivals in Europe and this, that, and the other. And that's what I want to do. 18 years old. So I go, and I remember that weekend at the Key Club, I had my upright bass with me, and I had my electric bass, and I had a suitcase with me. And that night, the Sunday night, he said, Charles Weller came back in the back room to get my money. He says, I'm sorry. And my name was Rudy at the time. He says, sorry, Rudy, I'm not going to be able to use you anymore. I was like, what?
Wow.
I didn't go to college. I've been on the road with you for a year now, helping you lift up that heavy P3 Hammond organ and all these little clubs. You gonna fire me? Why? I need to know a reason. I need to know a reason why, because I'm that way with any and everything I do. I need to know the reason why so I can continue on.
I dig.
So I said, why? He says, because of your timing. Now that was real strange to me, because we would, and I mean maybe I get it a little bit. Maybe him playing the bass pedals or playing the bass with his left hand, him having a personal relationship with that live, it's something that was really organic for him. And having the bass play in the way that I played, which, by the way, the timing was good, because the drummer and I, Abe Speller, we were just killing it.
Well, that's the thing that doesn't pass the smell test, because if the drummer was like, I can't lock, we need another bass player because I can't lock in, then that'd be reasonable. But this doesn't really. Right. This doesn't. Anyway, I think. Yeah, go ahead.
So that wasn't the case. So, it could have been a lot of things. So, but at any rate, I remember coming back home on the bus with all that stuff, and 1 week later, exactly 1 week later, and maybe the middle of the week. Oh no, 1 week later, I got a call from Reggie Lucas.
Oh yeah,
and James and Tume. And Reggie at the time and Tume, Reggie was playing guitar and James was playing percussion with Miles Davis. They were the Miles Davis band. And they were both from Philadelphia also. So they suggested that Ornette Coleman call me up, that I would come there to rehearse with Ornette for an upcoming tour. And they couldn't do it because they were with Miles. So, I remember going to New York and sort of auditioning, which wasn't really an audition, because as soon as Ornette heard me play, he was like, "Okay, would you like to go with me?" And I was like, "Sure." So that's how that worked out. But it's very interesting how those things, how they move from one situation to another, and that's pretty much how I wound up doing what I've been doing. Did you get a chance to go to did Ornette collaborate, or was he friends with Horace Tapscott? I'm not familiar with him.
He had this organization similar to Ornette's house, the Artist's House in New York. Horace Tapscott was out in Los Angeles and doing something very similar to that. But I mean, did you? Can you just can you talk a little bit about your concept of love and ultimately how you cultivated that love over time? Because everybody gets knocked down, everybody gets taken down, even though you you openly acknowledge, you say, I have to always know why, and maybe you're getting fed some BS and it's not even true, but yet you have to keep going forward. Part of that is just dedication. Part of that's love. And I just wanted you to talk about your concept of love.
Well, the love stems from love of God first, because you really can't move. You have to understand that everything that you've been created out of, the blood, the flesh, the water that's inside of you, every faculty that you have, Everything that you possess is not from yourself. It's from the Creator who has created you. From that, from that semen to that lump of flesh, to the soul, and all of those things that that you haven't created, that deep inside that you had nothing to do with, that you couldn't recreate yourself. So you understand that. So you have a love for the Creator. So when you have the love for the Creator, you understand, begins to love you when you do what's in accordance with what the Creator wants you as a human being to do. It's almost like you create a car, you design a car, and you design this engine to run like this. You have the blueprint to that engine. Now, full well, if somebody comes and puts something in that engine that's not supposed to be in that engine, it's not going to run. Something's going to happen to it. I mean, most engines today, if you put sugar inside of the tank or whatever, it ain't going to run. Something's going to happen to it. So the Creator who's created us, he's created us, he understands us, he's made us the way that we're supposed to be. We have to look at that and have that and give that love back to him. But when he loves us, we can only share that love with everybody else. And so with me and the music, the family is first. If something happened to my hands and I'm not able to play the bass guitar anymore, that doesn't mean that I'm going to go to the corner and just like start sulking and this and that and the other. Yeah, I might be hurt that I can't play the bass anymore, but you know what? There's so many more things to life. I mean, you think about the person who can't see, the person who don't have any hands,
right?
Or the person who don't have any feet, who can't walk. I mean, so it's easy for a human being to want to start complaining about something, but you got people around the world who don't have food to eat, and basic things like that. So that love that you have for the Creator who's blessed you with whatever he's blessed you with, I mean, it's just like I was looking on YouTube today, looking at these guys out of India for $1 repairing people's shoes. And I mean, you should see the work that these guys are going into, just trying to fix somebody's shoes. I'm in a room right now, I'm looking at maybe over 60 pairs of shoes. They're not all mine. These are stuff that I have inside my little shop called the Red Carpet Room.
Right.
But, my little boutique for men. But I'm just saying, I'm like, this guy's like burning rubber, trying to create recycle something so somebody else could have on their feet. I mean, so that love you're talking about, it only comes from loving the Creator, and the Creator loving you, and you in turn spreading that love to family. Because I love music and all, but music is not my life. Music is not. I'm not the kind of artist that goes, like, oh man, I go on tour and I play, and then when I come home, first thing I want to do is put my hands on the bass. Get the heck out of here. The bass guitar is going in the corner. I'm going to take some of that money that I've spent. I'm going to spend it on my family. I'm going to go to the movies. I'm going to go out to the restaurants. I'm going to buy some fly gear to wear. I'm going to spend money in charity. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to do all of that stuff. And then when that day comes, and when I'm gone, when I leave this life, and all this finery that I wore and all this beautiful stuff that I looked at that I appreciated, when all this stuff is taken away from me, and they wrap my body in this white sheet that's not even sewn up with no thread and put me back in the ground, then you're going to really understand the love that you're supposed to have had for the Creator and his creation. And so with all that understanding that I have on that basic level, I extend that to the music. I extend that to people. I extend that to family. So, I like music. I play music. But if something was to happen to me where I couldn't play music anymore, maybe I might become a producer. I mean, I am a producer now. Maybe I might become more of a producer. Maybe I might become
right,
more
but
of an
you're not. There are so many cats that's their only outlet, and even though they have all these gold records, like you said, and all these accomplishments, they're still not content people because they have no other outlet.
They are the most misfortunate human beings on the planet. Sorry.
Okay, so we've been cooking here for 55 minutes, and I would love to do part 2 with you, but I got one final question for you in set 1.
Right. Okay.
Do you believe, you said this before, the university should take some responsibility, but I don't know what they're supposed to exactly do about it, because like Kenny Burrell, interviewed him a couple of years ago, and I was pushing him to say, he was, they have jam sessions at UCLA now, which is great, okay? But the question I have for you is this: can the vocabulary of music grow within academia? And you know, you are an example of somebody who bypassed, at the time, was one of the only music schools, which was Berkeley, to get the bandstand experience. But okay, so can the vocabulary of music grow in academia? And because of the shortage of just community places to play and the lack of sort of the forefathers of the music still cultivating it.
The only thing with academia, in my idea, in my concept, is that it's only demonstrated to people how to play something what they consider to be correct, and to play something perfect.
Right.
Perfect. So
right.
And that to me is not impressive. You have some places in the world where people play music and they don't have any knowledge about anything that's coming out of Berkeley or Juilliard, and they're playing some incredible music. I was just in Morocco playing with those Gnawa musicians, and I just released a record called the Gnawa Soul Experience. And I tell you, these guys, man, boy, I can't even talk. I can't even say what that whole thing was about, the intensity that they bring. They don't know nothing about play C to G. They don't know nothing about playing A to F sharp minor ninth. They don't know nothing about that. But yet the music that they create, the intensity that is created, and the overall spiritual experience that happens when you hear or play this music is phenomenal.
But are you? So in this country, though, I mean, do you still feel it's about the music's got to feel good, and the question is, how are people supposed to develop their own original sound if there is no real places to play anymore?
Well, that's why you need people like me. I'm sorry to say, myself and other people. Ornette was one. He's put out a bunch of folks that, what disturbs me most about what's going on now is this cookie concept of the music and of the artistry. And I don't subscribe to that. I could play funk, what they call in terms of style, funk music. I could play in terms of swing. I can play, and all of that. But to me, there's something much more important than that. And so when people are locked into that, it has more to do with economics more than anything else. This brings back to your question earlier, very early on. It comes back to that economics. And so it's something that I think that, I don't think that the schools the schools are just providing an outlet for, but they all are also to blame somewhat because it's economics for them.
Right. They're just churning out. They're collecting the people's dough, and then there's no future for these people.
Exactly. They come out, they don't know what the heck to do. Let me tell you something. One master class that I did, I actually was in tears. I was doing a master class in Switzerland. We were sitting all around, and it was crazy because I know that the next day, I know they were all in the school talking about that bass player, the teacher he was crying yesterday in class. But what happened was, one of the guys started to tell me what he was, as a young musician, was experiencing. And I knew where he was heading with that, and I couldn't contain myself. He started to tell me that when he approached this club, the club wanted to charge them to play,
pay to play,
and the club wanted to have a situation where they were pay to play. And I thought that was the most heinous thing that I had ever heard of. But I know that it's going there. I know what's happening now. I know what's going on, and that's why it's important for the guys to be independent. Get your own venue. Get your own. See, that goes back to the Artist House with Ornette. He had that spot. Dewey Redman and Charlie Hayden and Higgins and Moffitt, they all was up there playing. And so he was able to collect the money. He was able to split the money. He was able to share the wealth. He was able to economically be self-sufficient. And that's what has to happen with these musicians. You talk about one club, that's corny.
Let's be clear. Ornette Coleman, Max Roach, Dizzy Gillespie would not have accepted that. I wonder, those guys were revealed.
No.
Those guys were they may not, Miles, Ornette, Dizzy, Miles and Dizzy specifically, they weren't millionaires. They probably should have been. They made good money, but they were looked at as this in the same regal way as doctors and lawyers were. The music has, to me, the music.
It's just about being consistent. Yeah. It's just about putting the work in and being consistent. The people that want the one hit wonder and this and the other, I tell them, I say, look, it's not about that. It's about just being quality crafted, doing your work, being consistent in your work, and putting in the time. And every project that you do, if it costs you $5, make it look and sound like it was $5,000. So it's just about that. Never shortchange yourself. I would rather not get paid $5, from a club owner than to make $2.50 myself, personally, and just be happy with that. Do what I got to do with that, instead of having to like kowtow to someone for sustenance. The only one that I bow down to and I cry to and ask for help is the Creator. And anybody else and all that, they just human beings like myself.
Okay, so just one quick thing to layer on it. What if you decided not to go to Berklee College of Music and write, because you knew that there were opportunities, better learning experiences for you, and artists and leaders that would totally hire you even without a degree? What does that say? What is the draw for? Can cats still go and do what you did and find a way to get in with, or people? Is it just? Even Lou Tabak and these old guys.
But get in. But I understand what you're saying. But get in with what in? There's so many different ends. If you're saying that, if I want to go to Berklee so I can become an excellent reader, so I could go out to California and work in the Hollywood scene and be there 9 to 5 and every day, and and after that do the Grammy show that night, and that end, or the end of I'm going to hang out with some guys and we're going to do some creative music that's going to really be interesting sonically, and that's going to do some things creatively on that level. So it's like all of these different ends. I've talked to classical musicians where I said, play something for me. And they go, well, what do you want me to play? I didn't say what it was. I just asked them to play something for me. Right. They don't have a clue. So it's, you got some guys that can, but the majority, they're bored. They hate it. Man, I hate to put this tuxedo on. I hate to, it's a whole thing. So I try not to even I understand that world exists, but I don't follow it.
Jamaaladeen, Tacuma, I really had a ball with you, man. We had a nice, great first set here, and let's just plan on picking this up in the fall sometime. We could do part 2.
Okay, yeah, let's do it, Jake. Jake, thank you so much.
All right, man.
I really appreciate you having me, and I appreciate it.
All right, man. Bless you, brother.
Bless you now.
Later on.
Peace.
Bye.
Later. Bye-bye.
Oh, nice heavy day here on the Jake Feinberg Show. Daniel Moore in hour 1, and then we just heard from Jamaaladeen, Tacuma, dropping some knowledge on us, and again, being thankful for what you have and how you were created and the blessings you had in your life and have in your life are about the only salvation you have. We'll be back this weekend at the regular time on Saturday, noon to 2. Until then, we're going to rejoin the Jim Parisi Show, but not before we hear from Rahsaan Roland Kirk.
And one of the pleasures of being on this show is being with people that I've known and worked with for a long time. And this one, I'm really, really happy to introduce the Black Master of Black Classical Music, Rahsaan Roland Kirk. Yes, indeed.